Welcome back to the show. It is a beautiful Tuesday morning. We completely skipped spring. We're now into summer. Just thought I'd let you know. I'm so pleased to be joined this morning by my painting partner, Angela Ross, from the Mark Amy Treatment Center and the Wood Buffalo Wellness Society. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We painted ravens, it seems like a couple of months ago now, I guess. And we had a lot of fun out there that day.
We did, and we were so appreciative that you were able to come out and share your talent with us.
There was a lot of talent in that room. We had a great group that painted, certainly one of my favorite animals, the Fort McMurray raven, or the Anzac raven, depending where you live.
Yeah.
You were saying, culturally, ravens are very special, and they're believed to have, I don't know, how do you phrase it? What makes ravens special?
Well, I was taught that they carry a spiritual message. It may not always be a positive message, but it's to make you aware. So I know that I was saying that a lot of people are afraid of ravens, given, like the birds, the Alfred Hitchcock movie and things like that, but they're actually a really important part of our lives.
They are also quite social.
They are. They are.
And it's not just me. I know I talk to the ravens all the time. People know that. But there's other folks that do, and I don't do this, but they feed them and they actually get really close. I'm kind of envious. They come right up to your car. And
they're very intelligent.
Yeah. And they're kind of crafty as well.
They are. If you sit and watch them for a while, if you have that much time, you can start to learn things about them.
They bring me gifts, and I can't say what they've been bringing me on the air. Let's put it that way. All winter, because we have a relationship, but they bring little bits of garbage. So every spring, I got to clean up all their gifts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Anyway, Angela is an addictions counselor with Mark Amy Treatment Center, and I know my colleague at the United Way, Megan, sent me a little bit of your biography. You didn't start in this field. You actually started your life in working with industry in some way. Talk about that.
I did. Honestly, when I was graduating high school, I did want to work in the human service sector, but my dad had put a little bug in my ear, and he wanted me to be self-sufficient and not have to depend on anybody. So it kind of pointed me in the direction of working in the oil sands. So so I just worked hard. I got an apprenticeship. I finished my journeyman millwright certificate, and I worked for over 10 years in the industry, and I had a lot of great experiences there. What
does a millwright do?
A millwright is a mechanic on equipment that doesn't have wheels. It's very similar to an auto mechanic, but a mechanic on stationary equipment like pumps, turbines, gearboxes, motors, things like that.
And my impression of millwork is, if there's a part that needs to be replaced, you actually have the technology and the ability to rebuild it. Is that correct?
Yep. So we just go in there, we do our PMs, our inspections, just to check to see where there's wear. And if there's considerable wear, then we'll take the whole line down, change out the part, and get it all back up and running again.
You spent 10 years.
Yes.
What was your favorite part of that part of your life?
The camaraderie, the people that I worked with. It was just lovely. When I was working at Suncor in extraction department, I just had a lot of great experiences. I had a lot of good support, and I love hard work. So if I'm busy all day, wonderful. Yeah.
Of course, the oil sands, you having lived here your whole life, it's part of who we are. It's part of who you are. When you were growing up in this region as a young person, how do you compare that to what we know today as Fort McMurray? What's the difference?
Do you mean growing up in the industry?
Yeah, no, growing up with the industry in our backyard. How has Fort McMurray changed over those years of being a kid growing up here?
My experiences of growing up in Fort McMurray were just wonderful. I have a lot of fond memories. The community was a lot smaller back then, so it's kind of like if you didn't come home for dinner, they knew you were eating somewhere else. When it started to get dark, you knew it was time to come home. I grew up in a great neighborhood in Thickwood, and there was enough for a baseball team, so it was wonderful. We had a lot of really close friendships growing up, and I really appreciated growing up in Fort McMurray. And my dad worked for the industry. I'm not really fond of the environmental backlash, but I have to say that that's what sustained us and continues to sustain the people in Fort McMurray and their families.
You say you grew up in Thickwood, but that area of the community has even a longer history with your family.
It does. Before the bridge was built, my grandfather, Jim Ross, had owned that portion of Fort McMurray. It was called Thickwood Hills, so it was just barren land. So when the city wanted to develop across the river, he sold it. And my dad had built our house. I think I was 2. It would have been, I'm not going to give the year away. I was 2. So yeah, that's where I grew up. And I have really fond memories of growing up there. And I remember as a young girl, there was not a lot of other houses. There was a helicopter landing pad behind our house, and I would be able to get on my grandfather's dog sled team and just go all around Thickwood. And there was no vehicles driving around and stuff at that time, but it was wonderful growing up there. I have a lot of great memories.
You said that it was before the bridge?
No, when they started to develop.
Okay, so the bridge came first.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would have been like for your grandfather before the bridge. I guess he would go over to that part, or maybe he lived on that part and just...
Yeah, he had a trap line. So I remember reading a lot of his journals, and he would keep journals while he was on the trap line. So he would leave for, months out of the year, and then keep his journal, and then travel back to see my grandmother. And their home was actually underneath Earl's. So when they expanded the highway, they moved up to Thickwood as well.
A lot of history. Angela Ross is my guest. She's an addictions counselor with the Wood Buffalo Wellness Society, which is the mothership of what we know as the Mark Amy Treatment Center.
Yeah.
How did you make the transition, or what inspired the transition from working in industry as a millwright to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, you see, I found a lot of satisfaction and thankfully a lot of financial sturdiness in my role through the oil sands plants. And I was able to evolve into the position that I wanted to do. When I was 17, when I was 18 and I was graduating, I was thankfully I was able to have the opportunity to go back to school and to do these things. And having growing up as an Indigenous person in this area, actually in any area, just growing up as an Indigenous person, we had faced a lot of the results of intergenerational trauma through my mother. So having grown up that way, I had learned a lot of lessons, and in Korean in my education, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about the effects of intergenerational trauma and how it affected my family, and even continues to affect some of my family. And I just started to feel a really deep connection with wanting other people to know, because I've always felt that knowledge is power. And once you have this power, you're able to do something with it. So when I discovered things about myself, I was able to grow even further. And I just wanted to go and shout it out to the world, like I just wanted to be able to help everybody who is struggling with addiction, was struggling with low self-esteem, trauma, or any kind of, encumbrances that they had in childhood. So I was really passionate, and as I continued to learn more, it increased my passion, and then I just continued to get the education that I needed to be in a position where I could help as many people as I can.
You're describing something that's very familiar. My son is First Nation, and his mother's aunt had a very similar journey to the one that you went on. And what I'm hearing is you went back to school, and it was almost like an intellectual, spiritual awakening.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What a wonderful thing.
Yeah, what a wonderful thing. And I'm really thankful to have the opportunity to have my mind open that way, and to be able to learn what happened, process those feelings of bitterness or anger or hurt and pain, and to be able to flourish with those and to use them in a positive way.
Before we go to break, one really hard question for you, and it may be difficult to answer, but was there a single light bulb moment in that learning journey that just continues to not shock you, but one moment that stands out that you went, oh my gosh, I had no idea?
Okay, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I had no idea about residential school.
That's not ridiculous at all.
Yeah, until I was 34 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you mentioned your mother.
Yes.
Was she in residential school?
No, but her siblings were all in residential school. She was in a monastery in Edmonton.
That's an observation that many of us make about that part of Canadian history, but you're Indigenous and you had the same
Yeah, the
feeling.
important thing is that why didn't I know? So that was the question that I needed to be answered, and through my education and stuff, I understand now why I didn't know.
We're going to dive into that. Let's take a break. My guest this morning is Angela Ross. She's an addictions counselor at Mark Amy Treatment Center, which is just west of Anzac. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
West and I don't know, somewhere by Anzac. And you're listening to Impact here this morning. It is a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, YMM Magazine, and we couldn't do any of this without 91.1 The Bridge. Welcome back to the show. Honored to be visited by, or visiting with, Angela Ross this morning from Mark Amy Treatment Center. Angela is an addictions counselor, but in a previous life, she was a person that worked with the oil sands industry as a millwright and loved it. But at some point, there was an awakening that you had the resources to go back to school at a little bit older than some kids coming right out of high school. And you had an amazing educational journey, and judging from your biography, you spent a few years in school.
Yeah, I did.
How many years and where did you go? What was your educational journey?
Well, first, when I started to consider a career change, I started just doing some volunteer work around the community and taking advantage of some of the CMHA's free courses that they offered. And I found a course one day, and it was an Indigenous addictions counselor. So I started to look into it, and I found it was out in St. Albert. So I talked to my husband and my family, and I really wanted to do this course, so I did. I traveled out there to go to school for a year, and I learned so much, and it was a wonderful experience, and that's just where my true awakening came about. And then the social work diploma at Keanu College came up, so I went through that, and then I thought that was the end of it, so I went to work for Wood Buffalo Wellness Society for about 18 months, and then I applied for the degree program at University of Calgary, and I was accepted, so I thought, okay, let's keep moving forward, so I finished that as well.
And when did you start in your current role as an addictions counselor with Mark Amy?
I only started about 7 months, but it's funny because I've been there. I was going to do it 3 times. So I finished my certificate program and I went out and I got the job there. But then the diploma program came up. So I ended up going to school to do that. So when I finished the diploma program, I went back out again and I got the job again. But I was placed in town with Wood Buffalo Wellness Society as part of the Red Road program that they were having underneath the umbrella of the Housing First program.
On that journey through the various schools and programs, were there people, mentors that really influenced you in your journey? And if so, do you have any that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have quite a few. A lot of my teachers, the instructors that I had met would have been the initiators of my journey at Nietzsche. There is very strong Indigenous women, and they guided me and they encouraged me, and it really empowered me to continue on my journey. And then, there's more distant ones that, I've studied. In particular, I'm going to say Gabor Mate. I've read a couple of his books. I've met him, had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times. I listened to his empowering speeches on YouTube, and we share a lot of that with the clients as well. That's how important and touching he is.
You have a quote that you brought of his. Did you want to read that now?
I did. It's just he's got so many. So I just grabbed one because it kind of it's well-rounded, so it's a little bit deep. So Dr. Gabor Mate, when we flee our vulnerability, we lose our full capacity for feeling emotion. I'm just going to provide a small background on Dr. Gabor Mate. Dr. Mate was a product of the Holocaust, and he was actually separated from his mother for his own safety. So early on in childhood, he felt that sense of abandonment. So he really relates to, a lot of the trauma that people who are struggling in their lives have had in their own childhood. So he's able to emotionally relate to that. So now he grew up in the States, but he's currently working in Vancouver's East Side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's a doctor there, and it's near the safe injection site. And I don't know how many people have ever frequented that area, but you can definitely tell the difference between it's you're driving and it's clean and it's beautiful, and then all of a sudden there's a darkness for a few blocks, and it's right in the core of Vancouver, and that's where he works, and he works with some of the most hurt, vulnerable, downtrodden people in Canada.
On the off chance that somebody's listening today who perhaps is struggling with an addiction of some kind, I think it's really important because we know there's a treatment center, those of us that are aware of Mark Amy Treatment Center, but I don't think many of us know, well, how does someone actually get in there? Like, how does that happen? What's the process? So somebody's listening to this radio broadcast today, struggling with an addiction. They know it, and they're at the point in their life where they're ready to do something. What is the process that you can describe for us? Because I know it doesn't start out there. It actually starts in town.
Right.
What does somebody do? What's the best place to start?
Well, we have a multitude of agencies with knowledgeable people who could guide you in the right direction, because most people aren't just ready to jump to step one. There's usually a conversation that has to take place, and thankfully there's a lot of agencies in town that can listen to that story, to have some empathy, non-judgmental atmosphere for you to open up a little bit. And sometimes just having that listening ear and somebody showing some compassion is enough to give you hope to actually take the first steps. So
some examples? Specific examples? Because again, somebody could be listening.
Yep.
They have no idea about agencies.
Well, the Housing First program has housing workers that support, the people that are being housed. So that would be one person that you would speak to. For those that might not be in that position, there's always listening ears at the Center of Hope. There's the Salvation Army. There's the workers at the YMCA. And of course at Wood Buffalo Wellness Society. But ultimately, the first step is usually people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're able to get a bed up at the detox center. They provide really good resources and referrals there as well. So what one would require is a referral source. Alberta Health Services is able to provide that, as well as anybody in that position at the detox center. So it's basically an explanation of the program, the length, the location, filling out an application with that support worker, and then they would just submit the application on your behalf. And we run a multitude of programs.
I'm going to stop you there because I think it's an important question, and I need to answer it for myself.
Okay.
What is the role and function of the detox center, which is here in town, and the Mark Amy Treatment Center? Do they work hand in glove in some way? Do you have to go through one before going into the other? What's that relationship?
Fortunately, yes, we do have a lot of support and a collaborative relationship with the detox center. The detox centers open doors to, when they have the availability in the beds, to people who just need to take a break, need to get away. They may or may not be contemplating the residential treatment center, but they're there for that support, regardless of whether they're going to leave and go back downtown or go home or wherever it is, or if they actually want to lead into something. Now, I can't speak for the detox center, but I know that their program is evolving. And they do provide referral sources, and we'll hold clients in detox up to the time that they enter into Mark Amy Treatment Center for us. So yeah, it's the community agencies in town are helping hands, and the collaborative effort and relationships that we're able to have with one another really enhances the experience and the of the clients that go to them. So
the programs that you run that would be called a residential program, people that are actually staying at the Mark Amy Treatment Center, is it a standard length of time, or does it completely vary depending on the person?
Well, we have standard lengths of time for programs. Some of them run 6 weeks, 7 weeks, but the majority of our programs run for 8 weeks. We're actually going to do some experimenting now. We are going to run a all men's program on our next intake, and following that, we're going to run an all women's program. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Demand for beds? High?
High. Very high. We get a multitude of applications.
So you have to turn people away then?
Yeah. It's kind of bittersweet because it's sad to know that many people need help, but it's good to know that many people are reaching out, and it's showing that they're looking for improvement in their life.
Our guest this morning is Angela Ross. She's an addictions counselor at the Mark Amy Treatment Center, which is run by the Wood Buffalo Wellness Society. We need to take one more break, and we're going to come back with more of this very important discussion. You're listening to Impact on 91.1 The Bridge. Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Angela Ross is my guest, addictions counselor with Mark Amy Treatment Center, run by the Wood Buffalo Wellness Society. And Angela, I'm very interested with the work that you do, helping people emerge at times from very dark periods of their life. Is there any, how do I ask this, consistency, or is there any pattern to that you, having been in the role for a while, can recognize, okay, this person, the light is on, they now have a chance? Is there any consistency to a person's healing that you as the counselor can see, okay, something really important has just happened?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not.
I thought that was going to be your answer.
We're all individuals. We've all had different journeys. We all have a different amount of support system. We've all incurred different amounts of trauma in our lives, and we're all at different points in our healing process. So yeah, some clients come and they are they're just tired, and they don't know where to go or what to do or what's going to help them. But staying in the program, you do see the lights going off, yes, and you see some that are a little more closed off because they haven't had the opportunity to ever open up before, or they've kept secrets so long. And there's so many variables, so it's not going to be a direct answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's perfect.
But you do recognize, yes, when somebody's open, when you feel that you've made a breakthrough with somebody.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's opening up. It's knowledge. It's incurring that knowledge. It's empowering the individual, and just instilling them with strength, and confidence.
We were talking off the air about the horrible events that happened in Toronto yesterday, and the many people that were exposed to that horrible event, including first responders, and the fact that they're getting a high attention, and rightly so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are going to be experiencing trauma. So my question is, you're on the front lines of helping people emerge from very dark places. How do you take care of yourself as an addictions counselor? And what did you learn along your education journey that equips you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, self-care was something that was really instilled in us throughout my whole educational experience. Reducing burnout, recognizing yourself, being self-aware. So self-care is a big one, right? We need to be healthy people. We need to be healthy-minded. We need to be healthy in body and in spirit. So obviously there's a multitude of things that we could do outside of the office for these things. And I really think that it's important that counselors seek help from counselors, because it's a confidential way to be able to get some release, and like I was saying, I'm thankful that we've evolved as a society and there's not so much stigma on seeing a counselor, because I mean, I think that a lot of us are taught that we need to be strong and we need to hold it together and we need to, but if that means that we're stuffing feelings, then it's really not healthy, for our immune system or for our bodies. So I just think that letting go of your pride, being vulnerable and opening up to asking and accepting help from others is one of the most healthiest things that you can do for yourself.
In what ways is the Mark Amy Treatment Center critical to the health of this region?
I think that I'm a little biased, but I think that we provide healthy, strong services to the people in and outside this community. We have a strong team, we have strong leadership. You can tell when you go to work and you're happy to be there, or when your days off are bittersweet because you want to be home with your family, but you don't want to leave. You don't want to leave, the clients or your fellow coworkers. So I think that when you're able to pull up at work and be happy to be there, that it really reflects on the happiness of your life and the fulfillment that you get out of your position of employment.
Circling back to my visit to Mark Amy a few months ago, it was a mix of staff and clients that were participating in the workshop. And my observation was that it felt a bit like a family. Is that a fair observation?
Absolutely. The clients spend up to 8 weeks there, and it becomes their home. And it doesn't only become their home because the length of time that they've stayed there. It becomes their home from the moment that they walk in the door, and the sense of belonging that they have there, and the sense of welcoming. And I have many clients have commented as soon as they walked in, they felt at home. They thought it was going to be more institutionalized, and they thought, that they were going to be judged or looked upon in a certain, but it's totally the opposite. When you walk into Mark Amy Treatment Center, you're unconditionally loved. You're accepted, and there's no judgment, and everybody's accepted. And that's one of the wonderful things about working there, because it doesn't only work that way with clients; it works that way with coworkers as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Angela, thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And
this is great.
For, your incredible journey. It's lovely and inspiring that you're doing the thing that you always wanted to do.
Absolutely.
If
I'm
only
very
more people
blessed.
could do that. That's just great.
Yes. Thanks
Keep
for
it up.
having me. I appreciate it. Take care.
Angela Ross is an addictions counselor with the Mark Amy Treatment Center run by the Wood Buffalo Wellness Society. And you've been listening to Impact. It does not happen automatically. It happens thanks to the great support of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray. Matt's here making us look really good. YMM Magazine runs articles about this show in their magazine every issue. And of course, none of it would be possible without our friends right here at 91.1 The Bridge.